Hello everyone, this is Dazz, and this week's discussion, I want to explore some themes and hidden messages in the film Us. And there will be a lot of spoiler alerts, so if you have not seen the film and you're looking to see it, then you should probably wait to watch this video because I'm going to summarize it in a brief synopsis. That way I can explore the themes within the film, and I believe there are many. The film opens right after the titles, asserting that there are thousands of miles of tunnels under the US, many of which have no known purpose at all. It then shows the year 1986, where young Adelaide Wilson, played by Madison Curry, and then as an adult played by Lupita Nyong'o, is watching television one night. She sees a commercial for the historic Hands Across America movement, which occurred on Sunday, May 25th of 1986. It was a benefit campaign sponsored by USA for Africa. The organization was first produced in 1985 by a charity track We Are the World, in which people within the continental United States joined hands in a human chain for 15 minutes. The event was organized by Ken Cragen, a music manager, and Cragen had also helped organize the We Are the World recording session. He credited his late client Harry Chapin for his activism, saying, "I felt like Harry had crawled into my body and was making me do it." Major cities across the United States formed the event route. Participants donated between $10 to $35 to reserve their spots in line and to receive a commemorative t-shirt. Funds that were delivered back to USA for Africa in order to distribute money to the hungry and homeless. While USA for Africa planned to raise between $50 to $100 million, Hands Across America raised $34 million, and only $15 million was distributed to the charity after deducting costs to produce the event. In total, 6.5 million people participated, so I had to give that background just because this was based on a real historical event that she was seeing. And I believe the news channel was 11 that she was watching it on. The theme of 11s will come up a lot in this synopsis and breakdown. It then shows young Adelaide at the Santa Cruz boardwalk celebrating her birthday with her parents one evening. She is wearing a Hands Across America t-shirt. Her dad wins her a prize and he asks her which shirt she wants. She picks number 11, which is a Michael Jackson Thriller. She then slips on the t-shirt over her Hands Across America t-shirt. Her parents are busy because her mom tries to get her to go to the bathroom, but she refuses, and while her dad is supposed to watch her, he's too busy playing a new game. Adelaide wanders away for 15 minutes and passes a man holding a Jeremiah 11:11 cardboard sign. She steps off the pier onto the beach, and a thunderstorm starts to rage, and she is intrigued by a funhouse called Shaman's Vision. Find yourself. In it, she grows fearful by all the mirrors, and you can see the reflections of tons of exit signs being reflected back at her. And the lights go out. She whistles to herself, and she hears someone else whistle exactly the same way back. Suddenly, she turns around, and her double is standing behind her. It then goes to show a bunch of white rabbits in cages. As the camera pans out, we see, among all of the white rabbits in cages, one black rabbit, and then we realize these rabbits are in cages behind a classroom. It then is present day, and over 30 years later, where adult Adelaide and her family of 4, which include her husband Abraham, daughter Zora, and son Jason, are headed on a vacation to meet with their family friends, the Tylers. Adelaide has flashbacks to childhood after the encounter, and how she was forced to go to therapy because she wouldn't talk. The therapist recommended she does something artistic or expressive to help her express herself, hence putting her in ballet. The modern, older form of Adelaide grows increasingly nervous about returning to the pier, but decides to go anyways. On their drive there, she sees a man being wheeled on a stretcher into an ambulance as police direct traffic. When she looks at the man on the stretcher, she realizes he's the same one from the boardwalk from 1986. He is dead, and in his hands are the cardboard sign that say Jeremiah 11:11. While they're hanging out with the Tylers, she loses sight of her son Jason. She later finds Jason stares at a man with his arms out like a cross with bloodied hands staring ahead. While at home, her husband watches a game where they tie 11-11, and Adelaide grows more uncomfortable. She speaks with her son about how she doesn't want him wandering off like that, and looks at the time where her son says, "It's 11:11. Adelaide confesses to her husband she wants to leave and feels there is this dark cloud hanging over her, explaining that night at the boardwalk over 30 years ago, saying she can feel her double creeping nearer. Moments later, her son runs out, saying there's a family outside their home. Adelaide's fear is confirmed as a silent family dressed in all red stands motionless. Adelaide offers to call the police, but Abraham says he can handle it and goes outside and confronts them, but they do not move or reply. When he goes to strike them with the baseball bat, they invade the house and trap the Wilsons on the couch, almost paralyzing them with fear. It is revealed that the mysterious family are doppelgangers who call themselves the Tethered. Adelaide's clone, Red, is the only one who can talk in a strangulated, hoarse sort of way. She explains in a fairy tale sort of way of a tale of a little girl and a shadow. Her story parallels Adelaide in Red. In her story, Red explains how while the little girl got to enjoy real food, the girl's shadow ate raw rabbit. While the girl played with soft new toys, the shadow played with cold hard ones that cut her. The little girl grew up and found a prince, and the shadow was forced to procreate with a tethered man resembling Abraham, who could not speak but only grunt. She was with him not out of love or choice, but because she was the girl's shadow, and that's who she had chosen. She describes how that girl grew up to have a nice little girl of her own, while the shadow had a monster. While Adelaide had a complicated C-section birth, the shadow was forced to cut herself open to deliver her son, who loved fire and later burned himself, hence why he wears a white mask. Red then cuffs Adelaide to the coffee table, and the tethered clones of the family members play mind games with them. The one of Zora pursues her outside, the one of Abraham drags him outside, and the one of Jason, they go up to the closet to play a game. They manage to escape from their tethered counterparts, and Abraham kills his doppelganger. The Wilsons look to the Tylers for help, but the Tylers have already been murdered by their doppelgangers. They learn that it's a national epidemic of clones of people in red prison jumpsuits murdering their doubles with scissors. While driving away, they are confronted by the double of Zora and kill her, and the next day they are confronted by Jason's doppelganger, but he manages to outsmart him by getting him to walk backwards into the fire. Red takes Adelaide's son, Jason, and Adelaide ventures to the boardwalk funhouse that's name has now been changed from the shaman's vision to Merlin's magic. She goes down an escalator that leads to a tunnel area and a classroom where Red stands, cutting red paper cutouts of people with their arms linked resembling the Hands Across America movement, which is also mirrored by drawings on the chalkboard. Red explains how at first she thought God was testing her, and her and Adelaide are special and were fated to meet that night. She explains how she wondered why Adelaide didn't take her with her. She mentions how the Tethered were originally created as clones to control those on the surface, but they had no soul. Instead, the soul was shared between two bodies. The clones were forgotten underground and went crazy, mimicking movements above ground without much rhyme or reason to why they were doing what they were doing. When Adelaide was put into dance above ground because Red was forced to do whatever Adelaide did below, she danced and it was freeing for her. The Tethered noticed she was different and selected her to be their new savior, and she began plotting. After Red finishes her speech, she then attacks Adelaide in a series of fighting, mimicking the ballet dance moves that she learned from Adelaide above ground. They fight until they are in a room where there's tons of beds, and Adelaide is handcuffed to one of the beds. Adelaide manages to stab Red and finds Jason hidden in the locker. Adelaide reemerges with him, and they are taken to an ambulance. Adelaide one last time recalls that night at the boardwalk where we learn she switched places with the real Adelaide, and she's in fact the Tethered. The Tethered choked the real girl, crushing her larynx, hence why Red had stilted speech and was the only one of the Tethered who could talk. This is also why Adelaide was silent in the beginning, when her parents first found her, and why she needed to learn dance to express herself. The movie ends with the red jumpsuit clones forming a human chain across America. So that is my summary of the film, and now I want to get into some of the sociological explanations behind it before getting into some of the deeper layers. Sociologically, I would say this is the most obvious form of social commentary that there is. The Tethered represent the other, or the oppressed group. Whether we're talking race, class, it could go into many different areas. Those who dwell on the surface are the privileged, who go about their lives without even understanding the pain that their fellow Americans suffer. One reason I get this conclusion is whenever Abraham asks Red, "Who are you people?" Red replies, "We are Americans." We also see that because we later find out that the Adelaide that everyone has been rooting for is actually a Tethered, it shows us that the Tethered are capable of leading normal lives lives and acting just like any other human if they're given the same resources and opportunities. Red's character could also represent a revolutionary. It takes someone who is from the surface world to understand what the tethered were missing out above ground. And maybe she felt sorry for them, hence why she never tried leaving. It does make you wonder, if she knew what it was like to be above ground, why didn't she try to fight back? Why didn't she try to go up there and to reclaim her life? And I think about this even in the history of revolutions or movements. Oftentimes we'll find people that spearhead them are people that get a taste of what other people who have more experience. They may come from a more privileged or fortunate background. This could also represent the broken American dream and those left behind by it with the inequality. And it could also represent how, while people are looking for monsters with the unknown or the other, that they themselves can become monsters. Hence why, even though Adelaide was seen as a hero, she was a monster to steal the real Adelaide's life. So the second layer that I want to look at with this film is conspiratorial and it's cloning. First, there's a theme of white rabbits that's throughout the film. We see it on the wall of rabbits, on Zora's shirt, and we also see Zora the daughter also wears a shirt on the first night of the film with the words Tho, which is rabbit in Vietnamese. It also gives me major Alice in Wonderland vibes, which many of us will say we're going down the rabbit hole. The rabbits also seem to be the first cloning subjects before people were cloned underground, similar to how Dolly the sheep was the first known animal to be cloned. Some conspiracy theorists like Donald Marshall claim to have insider knowledge on underground cloning facilities, which connects to the reference at the start of the film to thousands of miles of underground tunnels with unknown uses. This also reminded me a lot of the film The Island. Marshall claimed that through a process known as REM consciousness transfer, these elites were able to force the consciousness of a person who was asleep, who had an underground clone, into the avatar body to use it for nefarious purposes. This could also relate to the premise in the film where they explained an unknown group. We don't really know if it was the government. We assume it's the government only because earlier in the film, Adelaide's daughter Zora, on their way to the boardwalk, says how the government is trying to control people by putting fluoride in the drinking water. And no one really responds to her much. And she goes, okay, I guess we're just going to ignore this. So we get a reference that possibly these clones could have been created by the government. It also leaves it open as well to the idea, for those who follow transhumanism, we know that there's a transhumanist agenda. And there's this idea that they'll be able to transfer human consciousness into a body and make people immortal. This whole idea of human life extension. So could these cloning models have been an effort in that way as well? Also, in Get Out, Jordan Peele's other film in 2017, Chris, the main protagonist's girlfriend Rose's family, is doing something similar of transferring their consciousnesses into black bodies who possess abilities or traits that they desire. And maybe this is a connection from one film to the next, of maybe Us was the precursor to Get Out, in the sense that maybe the clones were the first attempt, but they move on to a new method. Also, some believe that there are those who are working on bodies for the disembodied spirits of the Nephilim to possess or use for Armageddon. Even more disturbing, the idea that these clones walking among us, unknown. So I think about like Armageddon armies here, and I get into a lot of conspiracy theory, what seems like science fiction. The idea of us having non-human like beings walking among us isn't too abnormal. And many of us know of cloning conspiracy theories of celebrities, and this also comes from Robert Marshall, and so many people have covered it online. It's also interesting that when we look at the idea that the truth is that the Adelaide we came to know as an adult was actually a tethered, it means that her children were half tethered and half human, making them some sort of hybrid. And then the last layer is the spiritual, prophetic, and numerology angle of this film. On a spiritual note, the Jeremiah 11:11 reference. If you look at the Bible verse, it says, "Therefore, thus saith the Lord, Behold, I will bring evil upon them, which they shall not be able to escape. And though they shall cry unto me, I will not hearken unto them." This was the judgment that befell the tribe of Judah for falling after strange gods, or falling into idolatry. Some could say that this was an omen for young Adelaide and later the rest of the world who would soon meet their sinister doubles. It could also represent the idea that Adelaide played with fire or magic idolatry unintentionally in going into the shaman's vision to find herself, that later turned into Merlin's magic, which led to her identity being snatched or stolen by the tethered. And I think about this because most people, I think, who end up in some really hardcore paranormal or occult situations that mess them up, they don't go into it usually chasing the darkest of the dark. It's little footsteps that can lead into something very dark. Also, the fact it was her birthday, and if her birthday was the day before or after Hands Across America, she would have been born in the zodiac of the Gemini, since it occurred in late May, possibly early June. I see the switch, which we know that the Gemini in the zodiac represents the twins, hence the theme of clones. Also, the Tylers had 2 twin daughters. I see the Tylers, the family friends of the Wilsons, had 2 twin daughters. I also see the switch that occurred in the film in a dark, sinister sense that this could describe demonic possession, which demonic possession is when an outside, disembodied spirit takes over the body of a living person. In this case, the tethered had a body but no soul. Rather than trying to coexist with the real Adelaide, as she mentioned, she wondered why she didn't take her with her. She choked her, strangling her voice, and took her life and subjected her to a cold, empty life of torture. Many times, people who describe demonic possession, when the being enters their body, it takes over. They sometimes are forced to eat unclean things, to do degrading things, and some even say that the spirit can get so much control in a process known as integration where it almost chokes out the real person's very identity. I also think this can be similar to those with multiple personalities who describe having fragments of themselves somewhere else, where altars take over. Could the tether represent the altar? Also, there was the rap song that played called I Got 5 on It by Lunas, which some people, because I did go and look at different analysis because I was curious to see what all could I catch to put into my analysis itself, but it could also even be a link to the fifth age. With that being said, with the fifth age, it could represent the age of the Antichrist. It seems like even though this film was micro, on a macro level, it seemed like the end of the world was coming with the emergence of these clones onto the earth. Also, the way Adelaide and Jason snapped off beat to the song could represent Adelaide's lack of soul since she was tethered all along. This film was released on 3/22 or March 22nd, which is a reference to the secret society Skull and Bones. When we look at the number 322, some have pointed out that the reason 322 is so important to those in secret societies is because of the reference Genesis 3:22. And the Lord God said, Behold, the man is become as one of us, to know good and evil, and how lest he put forth his hand and take also of the tree of life and eat and live forever. So we see there as well that those who are Luciferians are obsessed with Lucifer. They worship him. They see him as the light bringer, the bringer of knowledge, the one who set Adam and Eve free. So could this possibly be another reason why this film was released on this date? And with the theme of 1111, which is often associated with awakening or angels being near, since 1111 is an angel number. One thing I also want to point out with the homeless looking man who held the Jeremiah 11:11 sign is he looks similar to how Jesus is depicted, and I don't think Jesus looks the way people depict him. However, I think this was intentionally done by Jordan Peele, because later on, when the man is dead, you see the clone version of him with his arm stretched out like a cross, like he's resurrected. And maybe this represents the rise of the Antichrist with the new or fifth age of Aquarius, since that song 5 on It did play right before they went to the beach and saw this, and it also plays again whenever we see Red and Adelaide fighting, a remix of the song. And it's interesting that you had rabbits in it as well, because you could link this to Easter, which is really based on the celebration of Ishtar, the pagan goddess. The tethered also wore red, which red can be associated with bloodshed or war, which reminds me of the 4 horsemen, the second being the red horse. There was also 4 family members in the household. Also, could the prison-looking nature of the suits represent those who were once imprisoned in the earth, hence fallen angels or the watchers being freed or hell opening up? Could the scissors that they held not just represent perfect symmetry, but also the breaking of the veil, hence by CERN or some other sort of means? Also, lastly, the Wilson family, his father's name was Abraham, was a symbolic of Israel and the awakening after 400 years. hence the reference to Jeremiah 11:11 and the tribe of Judah and being cut off. These are all my references that I have and what I believe is represented in this film. I think it's multi-layered. I don't think it's just one little thing, and I think there's so much that I missed. And if you guys have any ideas on what else this represents, let me know. I'm curious to know, but I hope that you guys enjoyed my explanation of Us, and I didn't spoil it for any of you. I did try to warn anyone who didn't see the film, who was looking to see it, not to watch this video, but I hope that you guys all have a wonderful week. Take care, and God bless.